Oh, boy.
All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Cheryl Kionen. I'm the director of the Mentor Public Library, so thank you all for being here tonight. And if this is your first time being here, we encourage you to walk around and visit all parts of our library. On the second floor, we are incubating some chicken eggs, so it's kind of fun to check out. There are 2 restrooms located on this floor outside the meeting room here, and there's additional on the first floor. If you do have your phone, please silence it now if possible. And on some of your seats is our most recent cover-to-cover magazine. There's a couple upcoming programs I just want to throw out. We're celebrating our country's 250th anniversary this year, all year long. So on Monday, March 9th at our Lake branch is The Path to Women's Suffrage. And on Thursday, March 26th here at the main library is James Madison, the Forgotten Founder. Both of these start at 6:30 and both require registration. And we have lots of other history and other programs celebrating our 250th. Just visit our website for more information. And I also will put a little plug in. Those who enjoy sports, we have Terry Pluto visiting our library on the 31st, March 31st at 6:30. He's going to talk about his new book, which if you haven't heard the title is a good one. Why Can't This Team Just Find a Quarterback? And other thoughts on the life of Brownstown. So registration is required for that one too. For tonight's panel discussion, we have questions for our panelists to answer. Once we finish those, we'll open them up to the audience. There are note cards on the chair. Please write down your question and give them to Corey, gentleman waving his arm. Please note we may combine similar questions depending on time, and we may not be able to answer all questions. We do have a hard stop at 8 o'clock. If there's any part of tonight's discussion you want to rewatch, we are streaming this live right now, and we are recording it for our YouTube channel. So now I want to introduce our panelists for tonight. And they're not sitting in the order I wrote the names down on the sheet. That's okay. I'm going to start here. Dave Viva is the mayor of the Mentor on the Lake. Then we have Ken Flipiak. He is the city manager for the city of Mentor. And then we have Andy Rose. He's the township administrator for Concord Township. All right, now let's begin with our questions. So let's start with some basic information. Can each of you please describe your city, township, the size, demographics, and any interesting facts?
Sure. Thank you, Cheryl. In Mentor on Lake, the population was 7,131 at the 2020 census. Originally part of Mentor Township, the village was established October 22nd, 1924. The U.S. Census for 1970 recorded the official population as being over 5,000, and thus it became an incorporated city on February 12, 1971. According to the United States Census Bureau, the city has a total area of 1.65 square miles. The city of Mentor on the Lake is a small bedroom community. Why are we considered a bedroom community? Our city has no industry, just one large private utility, Aqua, Ohio, which operates across from Mentor Beach Park. Students in the city attend schools in the Mentor School District. Lake Elementary is the only school located within the city. Students and adults alike currently use the Mentor Public Library branch just down the street from City Hall. This library was completed in 1998 and is located at the corner of Andrews and Salida. We have 3,802 housing units, which are 60% owner occupied. The median home value is $162,200. The majority of homes in Mentor on the Lake were built between 1960 and 1989. Most of the city's housing stock was built prior to 1989, with less than 4% of the housing stock built after 1990. Interesting fact, the sunset views are outstanding from either Lake Overlook Beach Park or Mentor Beach Park in our city.
Thank you, and I agree, they are outstanding. Ken, do you want to go next? We'll go down the line and then we'll mix it up after that.
Sure, I'll be brief, but first of all, welcome all of you to the city of Mentor, where you're currently sitting, and thank you, Cheryl, for inviting us here today. So Mentor is the largest city in Lake County. We're just over 47,000 in population, just under, right around 27 square miles. Some interesting facts about our city. We are one of the top 5 cities in the state of Ohio for manufacturing. We also have right around top 5 or 6 in terms of the number of manufacturing jobs. We sit about number 5 or 6 in terms of the volume of commercial activity, so essentially retail sales we're talking about there. We have about 20,000 dwelling units in the city. Interesting fact about that is that our population has remained fairly static for the last 20 years, but those residential dwelling units have increased significantly from about 14 to 15,000 to about 20,000 today over that same 20-year period. So that tells you that the size of residential households is actually getting smaller. I'm joined here today by 2 of our city council members, Mr. Matt Donovan and Mr. Brian Cook, and looking forward to our conversation here today.
Good evening, I'm Andy Rose, and thank you for the library and thank you for attending. Concord Township's a little bit unique. We have a completely different structure of government where we're run by 3 elected trustees, and we also have an elected fiscal officer. And full disclosure, before we get started, I grew up in Mentor Lake. I live in Mentor Lake. I served on city council with Dave Eva for 6 years, and I, for 6.5 years, worked for Mr. Filipiak at the city of Mentor. So we all know each other pretty well. Concord Township's about 24 square miles. Interestingly enough, about 13% of our township is owned by either Metro Parks or the Natural History Museum. So we have a lot of preserved conservation open space. We get a lot of folks from Lake County and Geauga County that enjoy the Metro Parks within Concord Township. We're about 19,500 people. We're growing at a pretty good clip. We currently have 3 housing developments that are in various stages of development or construction. It's about 220 new housing units, and they're selling as fast as they can be built. They're moving along swiftly. About 9% of our township is commercial industrial, and we've got a new manufacturer that just closed on some land, so you'll see an announcement on that pretty soon. That's going to be about 150,000 square feet. And we're very proud to have University Hospital's Tri-Point Hospital and the new Seidman Cancer Center. That was a recent $37 million investment. Will be opening up later this year. That's Concord Township in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so can you explain to us what services your government entity, your city or township are responsible for providing? And you want to start, we'll go the opposite direction, and then next time we'll start in the middle.
Okay. Well, Concord townships are a little bit unique as we rely a little bit on the county and the state. We maintain the township roads. The county roads are maintained by Lake County engineers, and then the state routes, 608, 44, and State Route 86 are maintained by ODOT. And there's an ODOT garage in Painesville that services those areas. We do not have a police department. We contract police services with the Lake County Sheriff's Office, so that contract runs about $1.2, $1.3 million a year, and they provide 24/7 police protection to our community. We have 2 fire stations. We have our own road department with about 15 employees in the road department. We do zoning. We run a cemetery. So we provide all the basic government services. We do not have any utilities. Half the community is serviced by Aqua Ohio for water, and First Energy has the majority of it. And then Painesville Water services the eastern part of the township, and Painesville Electric has the northeast corner for electric service. So we're a very blended utility community. But we provide all basic services to the residents.
Thanks, Andy. So the city of Mentor is, again, it's a full-service community. I'm I'm hopeful that most of the folks in this room have enjoyed some of our services over the years. We do not operate our water and sewer utilities. The sewer is provided by Lake County, and our water is provided by Aqua Ohio. We have a very large park system. Obviously, all of our city infrastructure is maintained internally. That includes our stormwater system, roads, bridges, local bridges, and of course, all of our city facilities. We obviously have the largest park system. We have the largest road network in Lake County. We maintain more lineal road miles than any other community in Lake County. And our total valuation reflects that. We have over $2 billion in total valuation, which plays into, I think, the primary purpose of our discussion here today, which is to discuss property taxes. But our services are pretty wide-ranging, and they run from everything to our arts and cultural activities for things like the amphitheater and the Wildwood Cultural Center, to the many opportunities to enjoy quality of life activities at parks like Springbrook Park, our walking trails. We have the largest youth and adult recreation programs in Lake County. We have the largest senior center both in terms of size and in terms of activities in Lake County. I think the goal of our community is always to try to improve and to kind of push forward with some of the more interesting quality of life activities that our residents are after.
In Mentor Lake, we're responsible for the safety forces. We have our own police, fire, and EMS services, along with our service department that maintains the streets throughout the city. Service department is also responsible for maintaining the couple parks that we have, and also ensuring that property maintenance ordinances are followed by our residents.
Great, thank you. Is there anything you want to add to any of that? No?
I should probably mention we do have a police and fire services. We have the largest fire and police department in Lake County. For fire and EMS, we have 5 stations. Currently in the process of constructing a new fire station, our fire station number 3, which will be at the corner of Plaza Boulevard and State Route 84. That will replace Station 3, which is just immediately adjacent to Garfield Park. I know we're not here to really talk about some of the activities and plans for the year, but we have a pretty large capital program planned for this year and over the last 2 years. So you'll see a lot of new construction happening in our city this year. We'll be replacing all of the buildings at Civic Center Pool. We'll be plating a brand new, almost $5 million splash park at Garfield Park to replace the old pool in that area. We'll see some improvements, additions to Wildwood Cultural Center this year. So a lot of positive things happening. And of course, we have Mentor Rocks, and I know a lot of folks like to talk about that.
Thank you. So can you explain to us what revenue you collect, how you collect revenue, how much of that revenue actually comes from property taxes, and what are the other sources of revenue for each of your communities? Who wants this? You want to?
Sure, I'll jump in. Concord Township runs about $15 million budget. That's what we're looking at for 2026, and it's pretty flat from 2025. 73% of our revenue is property tax. We don't have the ability to collect an income tax. Never have. We do have a small JED that we partnered with Painesville, the Joint Economic Development District. That little area, and it's primarily made up of Tri-Point Hospital and a few other businesses within a township. They do collect an income tax of 1.75%. That brings in about $1.3 million. Property taxes bring in about $12 million. We get about $500,000 from the local government fund, which is money that comes from the state of Ohio down to the county, and then it's distributed within the county through a formula that's agreed upon by all the communities in the county. And we got a couple other small pieces: motor vehicle license tax. We get a little taste of gas tax, and things like that. But 73% is property tax, which is why this latest movement, quite frankly, is I'm watching it closely.
So for the city of Mentor, we're a lot less reliant on property taxes. When we talk about total operating revenue, the city last year brought in just over $104 million in general operating revenue. About 63.3% of that was generated by income taxes. Property taxes amounted to about 11.1%, or just over $11.5 million. The remainder of that is about 13.8% is generated by fees. Those fees include everything from what you pay for our rec programs and zoning, building and zoning permits, court fees, and things of that nature. Anytime you're paying a fee for a service, that's collectively goes into that. Our investment income generates about 5.1% of our overall income. Gasoline tax and vehicle registrations account for 3.9%. State shared revenue, which Mr. Rose mentioned, is that which is collected by the state of Ohio, and they share a small portion of that. That's generated by fees, income taxes, and sales taxes at the state level. And again, we get a small bit of that. And that makes up the bulk of it. So we're about a little over 11% reliant on property taxes.
In Mentor-on-the-Lake, most of our revenue is collected either through Lake County, the state of Ohio, local income tax through the Central Collection Agency, along with miscellaneous taxes and fees collected by the administration. Our actual data from 2025 shows property tax revenue of $3.2 million, which was 48% of our total revenue collected in 2025. Our total revenue in 2025 was $6.7 million. Police, fire, and roads are funded through the property tax revenue that we collect.
Perfect. You lead into my next question is, can you share a little information about your current levies that you have, what they cover, when they were passed, how long they last, all that kind of thing? So you want to, why don't you continue, and then we'll go down the line that way.
Sure. When we talk about levies, the inside millage that Mentor-on-the-Lake has is through the general fund and police pension. The general fund covers the following costs: administration, building and grounds, communications, council, police, fire, service, legal, engineering, our boards and commissions, and recreation. Police pension is used for the police department. Outside millage, permanent levies include police, fire, and safety forces. These cover the police, fire, and communications department. Outside millage, which is expiring in 2028, includes charter police, charter fire, and charter road levies. These cover police, fire, and road maintenance. Parks and Recreation levy, which was outside millage, expires in 2038, and this covers the Lake Overlook Beach Park revetment and improvement project.
You want to go down next?
Sure. I think probably there's some in the audience who understand the difference well between inside and outside millage, but it's probably worth mentioning. So inside millage is that which the legislative body for that community can institute that tax with a vote of that legislative body. Outside millage has to be voted by the residents of that community. So for the city of Mentor, our inside millage total is 3 mills. That constitutes 6/10 of 1 mill goes for police and fire pension payments, assistance. That frankly only covers a small amount of that, but it does cover some. And then another 2.4 we use for general services and primarily debt retirement. The city of Mentor does not have a lot of debt currently, but about half of that 2.4 mills currently goes toward debt service. That leaves, and then for our outside millage, or that which is voted, we have only one voted levy in the city, and that is for our fire department. So that's a 1.5 mil, which currently has an effective millage of only 0.39 mils. So that pays for a very small number of our firefighters' wages, but predominantly pays for equipment. So our fire trucks, our rescue squads, and it will help offset a portion of debt that we will likely incur when we build the fire station I mentioned earlier, which is about a $13 million project for us. So overall, our effective millage in the city is only 3.39 mils. So I think it's interesting, you have a nice mix up here because you have the township that is very reliant on property taxes. In this case, the city of Mentor on the Lake is sort of in the middle ground on that, and we're on the lower end of that in the city of Mentor.
Yeah, our levies, we have the inside millage, which is 3 mils. We split that. 55% goes to road and bridges. 45% covers our general fund. That's what takes care of administration, HR, zoning, recreation, parks, and cemetery. And then we have 2 fire levies. One was established in the early 90s. That's up for renewal. We can go as early as November of this year, or we can go sometime next year. We have a newer fire levy that was passed in 2024. Those are both 5-year levy terms. We have a road levy that's continuous that was established in the early 2000s, and those are collecting, like the road levy, for example, was passed at 2 mils. It's collecting at 1.19 effective. We have safety forces, which primarily covers the sheriff's contract and a couple of our firefighter salaries. That's continuous. That's been around since 2010. And then we have a small 0.6 mil bond levy that we use to finance the construction of Station 1. And those are all our levies. That's our revenue.
So you guys talked about the inside and outside. So you kind of answered my next question and the difference between the two. So voted on millage is subject to House Bill 920, which was passed by the state in 1976, and limits property tax increases on voted on millage. So I'm going to put this in, this is what AI told me, full credit AI, said in the simplest term, House Bill 920 prevents automatic tax hikes on existing voted levies, so entities do not see an increase in funding with home reassessments. Can you tell us how that impacts your voted on levies?
I can start, and I'll use your term in simplest terms. HB 920 has 2 effects. It controls so-called unvoted tax increases. Secondly, it forces local governments to return to the ballot if they want more revenue. For this reason, the HB 920 system fosters a kind of accountability. So each local government, if they need more revenue, they need to go to the voters and convince them that additional revenue is really needed. A fact from 1976 through 2022, there were 12,560 school operating levies that have been on the ballot. Roughly 53% of those which were approved by the voters in Ohio. These figures give Ohio the distinction of having more school levies than any other state. A major disadvantage of HB 920 lies in its inefficiency. Its control of automatic property tax increases comes at the price of frequent ballot activity, which we see here in Lake County often. Our Mentor on Lake residents have renewed our charter levies, which were originally passed in 2014. And again, as I mentioned previously, these will expire again in 2028.
There's not a whole lot to add to that, is there? It really just, when you think about that reduction factor, that's what House Bill 920 essentially instituted. So I use the example of the one voted levy that the city has, our fire levy. So we last put that on the ballot in 2017. That was put on and approved by about 75% of our voters as a permanent levy. But at that time, that 1.5 mil levy generated right around $2.2 million. It does the same, it generates exactly that same amount today. So as our property value increases, that 1.5 has now whittled its way down to a 0.39 of 1 mil. So that, I think, to Mayor Eva's point, that's why you see so many school districts in particular just kind of stack up those levies, because they have a finite number of dollars on each one, and then they have to kind of stack them up to continue to keep up with the rate of inflation.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look back in history I was a kid, but I remember reading the newspaper to my grandfather, who couldn't read well, talking about Ford and his whip inflation now policy and wearing the win button. I don't know how many of you remember that. I see a couple of head nods. I know, Mr. Donovan, you're probably not quite old enough. But anyhow, that was the last time Ohio really went through a gnashing of teeth tax reform process, because the residents were very fed up and pounded on the legislature to do something about taxes because they were rising with inflating home values. And in Concord Township, our effective millage rate is 16.2, but we're collecting at 11.67 because of the reduction factor. And that's listed on your property tax bill in the upper left if you ever look. But, the important thing to remember is when you go to the ballot box, it's not while the millage helps you determine what you're paying, on that ballot language, it states what the community is asking for. So if they're asking for $3 million, it will state on there $3 million, and you'll never collect more. None of us will ever collect more than that $3 million. But your taxes stay flat or actually go down a little bit as the effective millage rate comes down on the voted on millage.
One other thing that comes to mind too on 920 is that when we talk about inside millage, that's the amount that legislative bodies can enact without a vote. That's limited to 10 mils or up to 1% of the property value within a community. So it doesn't allow township, city, village councilors or boards to kind of go wild without letting the people weigh in on those decisions.
Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think we covered it all.
Okay, and I think that only certain entities can leverage inside millage too.
True.
So it is limited on who can do that.
Yes.
Going on with that, the state in 2025 passed several bills to give some property tax relief. What impact will these bills have on your community, if any? Andy, you want to start?
I'll take this one on. I've been tracking these pretty closely, but there were three main bills that were passed by the state recently during this general session. One of which is a bill that capped the increases to inflation. Everybody remembers the reevaluation that we had in 2024. There was a lot of gnashing of teeth. I get it. Going forward, those reevaluations the value cannot increase more than the current rate of inflation. So if inflation ends up at 3%, 4%, hopefully it's lower, but let's say it ends up at 2.5%, 3%, your house value can't get, regardless of what it can sell for on the market, the auditor cannot reevaluate that for more than higher than the rate of inflation. And that was done to prevent some of these 20, 30, there was one county that was average of 43% increase in property values, which caused quite frankly, some sticker shock. One of the other bills was they've added some teeth to the county budget commission. The language was kind of vague, open for a lot of interpretation, and they cleaned that up. So once the communities pass their budgets, we go before the county budget commission, which is made up of the auditor, treasurer, and the county prosecutor. We have to present our budget, And they have the ability, after looking at the budget and carryover, they have the ability to reel back the millage that we collect, the revenue that we collect, if they feel we're carrying forward too much money. So the Budget Commission isn't just a go in and say hi and have a cup of coffee anymore. It's justifying your budget and do you need the money that you're scheduled to collect. The third piece, which has been interesting because Lake County was one of only 10 counties that instituted this, is there was a bill that allowed county commissioners to double the Homestead Exemption Act. How many of you have heard of that? Okay, yeah, they doubled the homestead. They were allowed to double the Homestead Exemption Act and also allowed to double the owner occupancy credit. Lake County took advantage of that, and the commissioners voted to double the homestead exemption for those that qualified, and everybody got the owner occupied credit for the homes that are owner occupied. The great news is it probably saved the average homeowner about $20 a year for the owner occupancy. The bad news is, I know in Concord Township, it was an unannounced $340,000 hit to my budget, to our budget. That smarted a little bit. I understand why they did it, but it's, they enacted it in October before the end of the month, and come January, we were shuffling our budgets around. So every community took a bite of that sandwich. But those are the three big bills that have come out. I'm on a statewide committee, and we're tracking 73 different bills related to property taxes that are churning in various forms down at the State House. I personally think, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but the easiest one to pass seems to be having the hardest time getting out of committee, which is no foreclosures on owner-occupied homes. I don't understand why that one's hard, but I'm hoping that one gets rectified soon, because I think that's one of the major heartburn sticking points that a lot of people have. I'll pass it on.
Yeah, Andy did a good job of talking about the facts of these. It's interesting to me to watch, because the legislature, our Ohio legislature, has been very busy. I count 6 or 7 House bills that they've adopted and the governor signed that impact this. Andy's mentioned some of the big ones about capping the inside millage to inflation. They've also put increases in school district taxes also being limited to the rate of inflation.
20 mil.
They've added certain approved levies into what gets calculated for the school district's 20 mil floor. So sometimes I think that 20 mil floor is hard to understand, but the simplest way to think about it is let's say you have a school district that has adopted levies that total 30 mils. Well, as time goes forward and property values rise, that effective millage rate kicks in, and that gradually reduces, but it can't reduce below 20 mils. So years might drop to 28, 24, 20, but when it hits 20, that's the bottom. So at that point, school districts can start to see increases in revenue as the appraised value increases as well. So that has well been limited. One of my conclusions on some of these different House bills that have been approved is that you see a lot of politics being kind of pushed down to the local level, and I think you're going to see some real political activity centered around a couple of these. One in particular that was mentioned was House Bill 96, and that's where the county is given the discretion to reduce, to institute that doubled homestead credit and double the owner occupancy credit. So if you're 2 of 3 county commissioners that have to make that decision for each of those, and they have to do it every year, it's not an ongoing action.
Correct.
Then they have to reconcile that with every school district, every city, every village, every township, every park district that is reliant on that revenue, that now you've just decreased that by, let's say, 5 or more %. In the city mentor's case, that impacted us to the tune of about $300,000. Not a huge overall impact to our budget, but it's not meaningless either. Obviously, you think about that. That's 2 to 3 police officers that you can no longer fund, for example. I think another one that is going to become a very big political hot potato is the HB 309, which Andy also mentioned, which is the Budgets Commission's ability to reduce or suspend levies when, in their opinion, the community has too much money or they just don't need it, in their opinion. So when you think about the Budget Commission, that's made up of the county auditor, county treasurer, and the county prosecutor. And I think that there's some legislation that maybe might allow that prosecutor to be substituted for a commissioner.
Yes,
correct?
because if the prosecutor represents an entity, like, for example, the prosecutor's office represents Mentor Public Library. So when Mentor Public Library goes before the Budget Commission, the prosecutor will likely recuse himself, and they'll appoint a county commissioner as a stand-in for that particular hearing.
So the concern, and I expressed this to our local legislators at the state level who represent our city. My concern is that you have 3 persons independently elected through their offices who are now substituting their judgment for the elected officials within that community. So I have 2 of my 7 city council members here who are charged by our residents to determine what the priorities are and how much money they're willing to. Our council votes on inside millage, and our people have voted on our outside millage, in our case, our fire levy. They've trusted the judgment of our closely elected officials to be able to make those decisions, and now those decisions will be taken out of their hands by 3 county officials, and in fact 2, if 2 of those 3 decide that Mentor or Mentor on the Lake or Concord Township has too much money in a particular collection, then they'll just say, hey, you're out of luck. So I think that's going to become very political over time, and it'll be interesting to watch.
Anything you want to add?
Yes, I do. As far as the homestead exemption, it has hit Mentor on the Lake, cost us roughly $114,000, which, to Ken's point, that's at least 1 full-time police officer or a full-time firefighter. If those of you that don't know about the homestead exemption, it is for eligible homeowners that are 65 plus, or permanently and totally disabled. And that'll reduce your property tax burden. The other thing, too, with, I know we mentioned looking at your tax bills. The county does have a board of revision where property owners can file complaints regarding their property's assessed value. I looked at my bill over the weekend, and if you take a good look, you may see, at least what I saw in 2022, I saw an increase of roughly 17% in my value, and then in 2024 about 15% increase. So I would suggest to everybody to go in, take a look at your, go to the county auditor's website, take a look at your tax history, see what your assessed value is, and then also compare, what you paid many years ago to today, because it has gone up quite a bit.
Thank you. I want to clarify, make sure I have the right facts. So the homestead exemption is a state program to began with, and it is a discount or a savings to those who meet the eligibility, but the state backfills that dollar amount back to the community.
Yes.
This new part of the bill that Andy and everyone have talked about that the county can approve is not backfilled. So that's why there's a loss of revenue. So just wanted to clarify that.
Well, and again, with the elimination of property taxes, one would assume that the state is probably also going to be reconsidering reimbursing for the original homestead and owner-occupied credits.
Well, that leads me to the next question is there is a current initiative to put on the ballot to abolish property taxes. What impact would that have on your community? And what would you potentially, hypothetically, no decision making here, but what would happen, I guess?
Everybody's looking at me. You know, look, everybody knows about this surge to abolish property taxes, and I know they're running petitions out there, and it would be devastating for Concord Township. 73% of our revenue would go away. Some of our other revenue is pigeonholed. You know, the motor vehicle license tax and the gas tax can only be used in the service department towards roads. I can't move that to the fire department. So we ran the numbers. If we lost property taxes, we could operate safely for 47 days. Townships don't have the ability to institute an income tax. We certainly can't do a sales tax, nor can Mentor or Mentor Lake. So it takes away our only revenue tool that we have. So it would require some type of legislation at the state level to completely change how townships collect revenue, whether they start allowing townships to have an income tax, or one of our county commissioners says, well, just simply incorporate. Well, that's easier said than done, and by incorporating, I actually increase the cost to our residents because we assume control of the county roads, the state routes, so the service department doubles. We have to establish a police department. Service department would have to grow tremendously. The interstaff workings change. I go from no disrespect to the 2 elected officials, but we're hurting 3 elected officials. Now we're going to go to either 5 or 7. Nobody wants that. You know, 3's plenty. So it's a devastating change it would be a devastating change. There are 1,308 townships across the state of Ohio. So it would be a significant, devastating impact to townships.
So from Mentor's point of view, I guess I'll make a couple of comments on our impact, and then maybe some general comments about maybe my feelings on the subject. I had mentioned earlier that we collect about $11.5 million of our overall budget, which is about 11% in property taxes. And Andy had mentioned this. You know, we're limited currently. If you're limiting property taxes, that essentially allows us 2 avenues for additional revenue: income taxes and fees. So to make up $11 million in fees, you'd be doubling or tripling everything that you buy or need from the city that has a fee attached to it. And of course, there are diminishing returns on that as people just become unable to afford that. On the income tax side, it would probably, so we're at 2% income tax locally. That would probably have to increase by about 0.35 of 1%. So we would go from 2% to 2.35%. Now that, of course, assumes that we're going to simply continue to do business exactly as we are. The other option for that, obviously, is to cut services somewhere. And of course, you know, every community makes those decisions on an annual basis. And so I suspect that our first option would be to try to avoid additional taxes as much as possible, but that always comes at a sacrifice. Less so in our community, because again, about 64% of our revenue is generated through income taxes. And because we're a large job-providing community, one of the largest in the state, we benefit greatly from that, because a lot of the labor that comes in from outside of our community works here, and most of those dollars stay in the city. Of course, when our residents work elsewhere, they're credited again. So if they're working in Willoughby, for example, Willoughby collects the 2% and they get a full credit, so they're not paying anything to the city of Mentor at that point. That's another option for cities to change the credit. So if you work in Willoughby and live in Mentor, right now you would get a 2% credit. You'd pay 2% of your income because you get that full credit from the city of Mentor. Mentor could say, we're reducing that down to 1.5%. So now you're paying 2% to Willoughby and 0.5% to the city of Mentor to make up that difference. So those are options that we would have. I guess my general comments, and I think this kind of runs along what the broader argument is on this question of elimination of property taxes. The money has to come from somewhere. I'm of the opinion that, you know, the 200 plus years that Ohio has been around, we've found a formula that tries to find balance. You have a combination of income taxes, property taxes, fees, sales taxes, and together the intention of that is to find an arrangement whereby no one group or subset of people within our state is disproportionately advantaged. So if you're putting all that impact now, all the emphasis on income taxes, working families that are hurting enough right now trying to buy groceries and other things are going to have a significant portion of that of their income now removed. If you're heavily reliant more now on sales taxes, you're going to see people who at the lowest level of income who are going to be disproportionately impacted because now the basic things that they need to buy are going to be that much more expensive. You're also going to see, in my opinion, a significant shift in the amount of commerce that's done in Ohio. So if I'm buying a car, if I can buy a car at 4% less now, or because sales taxes jump 4% to make up the difference, and I can buy it in Michigan or Indiana, I'm gonna make those choices. So, and of course, fees are wrapped around a lot of what we do. So I think that we have to be careful and mindful of who gets hurt. I think everybody in the room understands that when you have these broad spikes in evaluation, and frankly, our community has had one of the smallest increases in overall valuation, and I'll speak about that a little bit later. That's predominantly due to the fact that we have a large commercial base here. So the factories and the large box stores and that really reduce the overall burden that's placed on our residential homeowners to keep those costs, those property taxes down, and that's reflected in those increases as well. And frankly, our property values have been fairly more steady than some of the other communities around the county, but I think we all understand that when you see these big spikes, it does disproportionately impact people who are on fixed incomes or who have homes that have been paid off for a very long time, and all of a sudden their property taxes are increasing by 30% or more. So that has to be addressed. I know that there have been a lot of suggestions on that. My colleague over here had a very good one that I certainly feel is fair. The idea of not increasing property values until that home changes hands, until it sells. So it remains static until such time as someone buys it, and then we know what the true value is because the market has decided that. I've suggested in the past that the state consider inflationary adjustment factors. In Ohio, we're taxed on 35% of the value of our property. You could adjust that down to 34% or 33% and have a self-adjusting factor. So there are ways to do it without upsetting the entire structure of taxation in our state that I think does as good a job as any state, although nothing is perfect, right? In trying to find a balance on who gets hurt and who doesn't.
For us in Mentor-on-the-Lake, as I mentioned before, we would lose approximately 48% of our revenue, or $3.2 million, based on what we collected in 2025. Eliminating these property taxes would force deep cuts to our essential services, this being the police, fire, more than likely delaying road and infrastructure repairs, which would almost lead to reducing staff on duty, which could lead to slower emergency response times. Right now, as I said, we're about 1.6 square miles. Our police and fire can get to one of our residents in a matter of 3 or 4 minutes. I do not want to have to increase that response time beyond the 3 to 4 minutes. If there is a resident having a heart attack or a stroke, you need to be there in that amount of time. To Ken's point too, we looked at what the alternative would be to replace roughly $3.2 million in revenue, and by increasing our income tax rate right now is 2%. To bring the same level of revenue, we would have to go from 2% to roughly 5.24%. Which, that won't go over very well.
Which would never get passed.
Never. Right. And I will add, I pulled a memo from the Ohio Office of Budget and Management, and this went to the governor, Mike DeWine. This is dated February 4th of 2026. And the title here was Consequences of Local Property Tax Abolishment. And just at a high level, the income tax and sales tax rates could be increased, at the state level, which is what they're telling the governor. Higher tax rates would discourage, of course, economic development and burden low-income households. The statewide sales tax right now is 5.75%. If sales tax were to replace property taxes, the sales tax rates could approach 15 to 18%, which is higher than any other state. And so by approving or rejecting property tax measures, voters would have control over the service quality, scope, and responsiveness. But when we, nobody raises their hand and says, I'd like to pay more taxes. But I think we all need to go back, look at your tax bill. I know when we put charter levies on the ballot back in 2014, one thing that we looked at and made it clear to the residents was when you look at what you're paying to the city, what you're paying through the schools, to the library, Lakeland, what we get about 27% of that total bill, okay? The county gets 12% of that. So when you look at, and I look at my bill, okay, my total property tax that I'm going to pay this year, roughly $4,097. What my city, what Mentor on Lake gets, $1,120, and that's where I get the 27%. So the rest is going elsewhere. But, like I said, please go back, look at your tax history, look at your assessed value, and make sure it's in line. And I think, to Ken's point and Andy's point, I'm all for reducing that 35% to 34, 33%, which could save, individuals probably $350 or so based on my tax bill, but $350 is better than no property taxes at all.
I just want to pick up on one thing that Mayor Eva said too, because when you think of, we had, each of us has mentioned that, cities can't levy sales taxes, only counties can. Townships can't levy income taxes, only municipalities can. So we have some limitations there. When you think about solutions to try to raise the same level of revenue or revenue that is just absolutely required to provide basic services, a lot of the talk has gone to what Mayor Eva mentioned about the state collecting larger sales taxes. One of the challenges with that I see, and I haven't seen a whole lot of discussion, but it's something that I think about because we've seen this at the local level, is when the state is collecting your revenue, jurisdictions at the local level are in a position to have to take what they're given at that point. So when you pay your 2% income tax to Mentor, or your property taxes to Mentor, or the fees that you spend on it, 100% of that goes to local services. It's not going to the state. It's not. What we receive from the state, and Andy had mentioned this earlier, we called it local government funds, or LGF, but it's a combination of fees and taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, and other fees that are collected by the state from jurisdictions around the state of Ohio. They collect that and they send some of it back. About 10 years ago, they decided to cut that in half. That decimated a lot of communities. There are communities, including right here in Lake County, that are still trying to recover from that loss of revenue. That was a legislative decision signed by the governor, happened overnight. So, keep in mind, when you're paying taxes locally, you're paying it to, you're investing in your own immediate future where you live and work. And, when we think about, that argument between big government and not being controlled by it, you're always better off with when you're, government in general may not be the most popular thing in the world, but closest to the people, you have the most control over that, and you have the most control over the resources that that you're graciously giving them for your services that you expect.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on both of these two gentlemen. The state lowered the state income tax rate to a flat 2.75%, and they took away a higher tier tax bracket. That's going to directly affect the monies that local governments get from the local government fund. It's going to affect the public library fund. It's going to affect what the schools get, because it's a percentage of what is collected. And quite frankly, I don't know about you, but I like the residents of the community to control the funding for that community, not have the state do it. The second thing, going back to the income tax, the other piece of that is, and we're seeing it here in Lake County, there's 2 school districts in Lake County that are on the ballot this May for an income tax. Not a property tax, an income tax. So property taxes go away, schools have the ability to levy an income tax. So not only do you have the city income tax and possibly a township income tax, should the state turn that on for us, we don't know. But you're talking about your local city, village income tax, and then you're going to have a school income tax on top of that. And then you start talking about possibilities of reciprocity. There are 2 communities in Cuyahoga County that don't grant reciprocity, or they grant 50% reciprocity. You get 1% instead of 2% credit. So you're starting to see some of those things happen already. I mean, you could end up with working families 4 and 5% income tax at the local level. And there's no tax return where you get a rebate because you deduct the number of kids you have. That's flat and comes right off the top. So that's a significant impact to those working families that are, trying to buy a home or fix up their home or get a car so that they can commute to and from work, raise kids, save for college. The list goes on. So those are all the other things. And then there's the other entities that I don't want to say get forgotten about, but people don't think about all the other things that property taxes take care of. You have developmental disabilities, you have the alcohol, drug addiction, mental health services, you have the senior levy.
Yes.
There's a children's services levy. You've got a crime lab. We've got a terrific crime lab here in Lake County, and it significantly cuts down the wait time for evidence to be processed rather than going down to the main lab down at the state level. You got developmental disabilities,
The metro parks.
the metro parks. you know, all that stuff comes into play, and it will significantly crimp the quality of life for folks across the state that rely. I mean, Metro Parks, I can't tell you how many people use Metro Parks, but, you know, and it's easy to say, don't worry about, but a lot of people use them. A lot of people rely on those. Veterans Park in Mentor is the second busiest Metro Park in the county. It's packed. So those are just some of the things to think about.
So you kind of answered one of my questions, but I'm going to throw a new question to you.
Sure.
Because we really haven't talked, well, it made me think when you were talking about income tax, that is to an individual. What, let's talk about businesses. And what do they contribute to your city, township, that sort of thing? And that's what would happen or impact that would have.
I'm going to start with this one because we have the largest, obviously, business sector in Lake County. So again, that is a really good question. You were going to, later, I think you intended to ask a question of us. You know, tell me something interesting about your community that somebody may not know. And one of the fact that I wrote down is that of the 37 jurisdictions in Lake County, so all the villages, the townships, the cities, City of Mentor has the lowest residential property tax rate of any jurisdiction in Lake County. Why is that? It's not because, you know, when you look at the school districts and that, they're kind of on par. Actually, our school district is actually a little bit lower than some of the bigger districts in Lake County, where it competes very well in that respect. But the biggest reason for us is because of the enormous value of commercial property, the industry, the commerce the buildings that are in the big boxes all along Mentor Avenue. So they're not subjected to that reduction value. So they get charged the full value property taxes. In our jurisdiction, for example, if you were to eliminate property taxes, all of that residential, that all falls now on the residential of the residents as a residential burden. So now when we talk about trying to pick up that revenue, you're giving a really nice break to the corporations, but the guy now who's working for $18 an hour is going to have a much harder time to make up that difference than he did before. Frankly, corporations generally don't pay a lot. That's a very small part of what we generate in revenue through our income tax. So we also have a business profits. Business profits are also generally subject to our 2% income tax, but that's a very small part because businesses that continue to invest in creative accounting, I'm sure, contributes to that. That doesn't really, so most of ours comes from withholding from our residents. So, you know, you eliminate property taxes, you give a lot of the commercial property owners who, frankly, most of which may not live or have a lot of business here in Lake County as individuals who don't live here. Now they're getting a pretty nice break, and that burden gets pushed down to the residents. So that's a, you know, again, it comes down to sharing that load and having that balance. And now you're disrupting that. It can have some really disadvantageous impacts on individuals.
The other piece to that is if you jack the sales tax, you're going to make the businesses less competitive.
Very much so.
If I make a widget in Mentor and I'm selling that hydraulic fitting for $1, I have a competitor in Indiana that sells it for $1.02, but all of a sudden I have to start selling it for $1.05 or $1.06 because I have a much higher sales tax. It's going to shift that over to the Indiana or the Illinois or the Pennsylvania manufacturing company, and it's going to put a significant hurt if the business can't absorb to eat that additional cost. So that's another factor that has to be looked at as well.
I think for us, our business revenue is roughly 8%. As I said, we have no industry. I mean, Mentor, Concord, hospitals, industry there. We have no industry. All we have is, Aqua, Ohio. We do, as a small, as I'd say, bedroom community, we do have amenities available for our residents. Giant Eagle, Mark's, Dollar General. Everybody has a Dollar General, of course. But to Andy's point, and I've talked about this with the staff, if you look at a sales tax of 15 to 18%, people will go elsewhere. They'll go out of state. What we worry about is, for example, Giant Eagle. How many people are going to be walking out of Giant Eagle with a cart full of groceries and didn't pay for it? So you're looking at an increase in crime too, because people will not afford, groceries at a 15 or 18% rate or anything at that type of rate.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to share? Do we have any questions? Okay. Oh, we got one. So, okay, is there anything you want to share while we gather questions?
Yeah, just to lighten it up, one little fun fact. Concord Township, our town hall where we hold our public meetings, first and third Wednesdays, is the oldest meeting hall in Lake County. We've been continuously meeting in that room since 1870. And I invite you to come by. Every now and then, somebody comes in and asks for the nickel tour, and I'm happy to provide it. But and the oak floors are original to 1870 that we've preserved and refinished.
Well, and you know what? Can you all tell us too when your council or trustee meetings are? Because they are open meetings, and everyone is always welcome to attend.
Open meetings. It's first and third Wednesdays at 6 o'clock.
Our council meetings are first and third Tuesdays at 7 o'clock.
Ours are second and fourth Tuesdays at 7 o'clock in the community room.
So you could go to every single one of our meetings and not have to worry about missing the other ones. That's very exciting.
Yes, that time does
Well,
get
yeah, that's
adjusted
right.
in the summer for June, July, and August for
Yep.
us.
All right. So I think you mostly, well, I'm not sure. I'm just going to ask this question again. What is the breakdown of residential to commercial taxes? So you said how much you collect. Is that the breakdown then, or is there anything else to add to that?
I can answer that for Concord Township. We about 12 to 13% of our revenue is from commercial property. The rest is residential.
Well, from again, our total collections and revenue for property are just over $11 million. I would say that the majority of that is generated by commercial property.
I'm going to stick with the 8% being commercial, the rest being residential.
All right. And then this question is not necessarily about your city or township, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add or not.
Sure.
If Ohio gets rid of property taxes, then how do we fund the schools?
That's a very good question, and there's been a lot of debate on that. I've chatted with a couple of superintendents. I don't think anybody has a clean answer. There are some that say just issue vouchers to all school-age children and let the school markets compete. I think that's a terrible idea, absolutely terrible idea. I would think that if property taxes unfortunately went away, I think the state would have to pick up an additional share, whether they just lowered the income tax, but they may have to add a point and a half to the state income tax to feed to the schools. And that's one of the big arguments behind the Abolish Property Tax group is that the state constitution has specific language that says the state should fund the schools. So I think it'd be a combination of an increase in the state income tax, maybe part of the increase of sales tax, and then schools implementing their own local income tax, which stacks on top of the municipal income tax, would be how they funded the schools. I don't see any other way to do it without property tax.
So right now in Ohio, the only two ways are property tax and income tax. You know, I think it goes back to a more general question too. Nobody here in this room has the answer of how we would fund that going forward. But what we do know is that there are no free rides. And what I can tell you, and I don't know how many folks in here are graduated from Mentor High School or went through the Mentor school system. So there's always a good bunch. So what I can tell you is that communities. The success of any community is very reliant on the quality of its school system, as much as any other factor. It provides not only those persons who make for great employees, trained employees, it contributes to the community arts in your environment. It's so many things are reliant on that. It embeds people. Weds people to a community that you hope will stick around and invest there over time. And you just simply can't have a successful community without a successful school system. So what we have today is communities who get to make the choice on how much they want to invest in that school system and how good it has to be, how good they want it to be. And, you know, I go back to something I said earlier. If we're looking at some centralized manner in which to fund school systems across the state, you're gonna probably gravitate toward a lower standard than what maybe we expect in our community, and I would hate to see that happen, because right now you get what you pay for, and our city, and I think all of our communities have benefited very well from the quality of education our local districts have provided.
I agree.
Yes.
All right. Oh,
So the discussion so far has all been about generating money. Can we talk about efficiencies? If I remember correctly, John Kasich tried to move our state to a more efficient way of doing business, such as Ohio has 600-plus school districts, Florida has 60. A lot of people use Florida as a governmental model. They have no state income tax. We have community after Pipsqueak community all up and down Lakeshore Boulevard. They all have administrative offices. There's a lot of money that gets spent that doesn't really need to be spent, I think.
So let me, because this is live stream, so no one can. That's why we had everyone write on the card, so I could read it out loud for the live stream. So the question is basically, there are several hundred school districts in the area. Or in the state, there are lots of hundreds of communities. Is there duplication or consolidation an option? Is that a good assumption?
Take the first bite. Yeah. That's been discussed quite a bit lately. I know that there is a plan. I think it came out of the County Auditors Association of Ohio, and it also came out of the property tax working group that the governor put together. I think the plan was 94 school districts. It'd be one school district per county, and then they would carve out the big six: Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, Toledo, Youngstown. Yeah, that's six. Is it six? Yeah.
What about Parma?
So I don't think Parma would be part of Cuyahoga County, I think, is in that particular plan. But there was a lot of blowback, and it goes back to what Mr. Filipiak said about local control. Even consolidating to the county, that would get contentious, and you tend to gravitate your funding to the lowest common denominator, and so a lot of folks don't like that. I'm not saying it's not feasible, it's not practical. I think it would probably be a good idea to do some consolidation. I think this is Andy Rose's personal opinion, there are some local communities that need to consolidate. There's I don't remember the county, there's a county in southeast Ohio. I think the entire county population is about 22,000 people, and they have 16 local governments for 22,000 people. But each one of those communities is 25 square miles. They're all farmers. So it becomes a space distance thing in managing satellite fire stations and roads and things like that. But I think there are some efficiencies that can be made with some of these smaller townships, smaller villages, merging in with some of the neighboring larger communities. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't disagree with you.
I agree with that 100%. You know, we do, certainly you can, I think we all understand there's some very small jurisdictions in Lake County that if you look at, you know, per capita cost to serve them are probably much, much higher than the larger communities in Lake County. I think I said this earlier, you know, there's certainly distinction from community to community. You know, it's much easier for, I can assure you that the city of Mentor would first try to not increase its revenue if we lost all revenue from our property taxes. It certainly comes at a cost. Everything comes at a cost when you're looking at a loss of revenue. But when you're talking about the townships or a city like Mentor on the Lake, that loss is, you can't overcome that through efficiencies. You can't overcome a loss of 70% of your revenue or 50% of your revenue through efficiencies. You have to look at other. Now, can we become more efficient? Absolutely. We strive to do that constantly in our local governments now. So I think it's definitely a combination of the two.
So that actually leads me to a question about shared services and partnerships you have within the county, or so maybe talk a little bit about what you do already that is shared in terms of services and things.
We do a few things in Concord Township. We you know, Painesville Township has a brine machine that makes brine. We go over there and purchase brine off our local community. We have an emulsion, which is basically a tar goop for crack sealing and for Durapatching that we maintain in Concord Township, and we actually, Mentor comes over and fills their tank off our emulsion so that they don't have to buy a whole nother set of equipment. The service directors are probably some of the best at sharing equipment, sharing services. Right. You know, hey, I've got a guy who's qualified in this, can I borrow him for a day with the equipment and so forth. So I think we do some of that already.
Yeah, there's a couple of ongoing discussions right now along those lines. The county and nearly every jurisdiction in the county recently adopted a new 911 service plan, which will transform us to what's referred to as next generation or next gen 911, which provides a higher level of service. That change has led to a great deal of ongoing discussion about consolidation of some of those dispatch centers. You've seen a lot of it already. A number of jurisdictions are served by the county sheriff's department, or what we call central dispatch. And I think you're probably over time likely to see what is probably now about 20 or more dispatch and service sites where they receive calls, to probably down to 3 or at the most down the road. Right. That's significant. Other examples of that, I remember a number of jurisdictions, I would say about 15 years ago, the city of Mentor consolidated its refuge service contracts. So we did curbside recycling, garbage pickup, and yard waste pickup. By bringing that together under one contract, we provided a greater level of service and at less money for all of our residents. Most of the larger communities in Lake County piggybacked off of that contract or modeled it after that contract, and is also saving that. So when you see best practice, so we not only share services, but we also share best practices. There are 6 communities in Lake County where Route 2 runs through that under Ohio Revised Code. Another good example of state government pushing responsibilities down to the local levy level. We're responsible for maintaining State Route 2 through our 6 jurisdictions. We work together and we contract basically with the county engineer's office so that they perform that. We pay them on our behalf. It's more efficient than having 6 different jurisdictions out there plowing snow and cutting grass and filling, fixing guardrail and that. So there are a lot of examples of that in Lake County already. To the point Mr. Rose was making earlier, there are some smaller jurisdictions that I think are struggling now and probably ought to give some consideration to consolidation with their neighbors. A lot of these smaller communities are already being served by their neighbors. It's on a contractual basis for fire or police services or other services. So and again, as we look for ways to save money, that's at the top of the list for sure.
When you mention, efficiencies, when I first got on city council, this was probably 20-some years ago, we did have a discussion about regionalizing the fire service. And it really comes down to, I have so many chiefs and you can only have, it gets, what's the best way to put it, a little political about territorial, there you go.
Fiefdoms.
Who's going to do what?
Right.
And those talks really didn't go anywhere. I can tell you, though, with Mentor, we combine our Mentor on Lake Road program with Mentor to get a quantity discount. So when we do concrete or asphalt work, they do so much, we do a little bit, but we're getting the discount because of the quantities that are combining. Along the same lines, it was probably late last year. We're doing a storm sewer project on Southland, and they said, well, you need to jet the storm sewers. Well, we don't have the vacuum and the jet. We call Ken and say, hey, can we borrow somebody for a day? They're able to come out and do that. And it's the same when you talk about mutual aid, fire and police. We have usually 2 police officers during a shift on duty. If something goes beyond that 2 people, Mentor is right there. If we have a structure fire, Mentor, Willoughby, all the surrounding communities are right there for us. And that's really being responsible. If we need to go out and send our fire service somewhere, we'll do that. And it's really just, respect for each other and making sure that everybody in Lake County gets the service that they need.
I think safety services are probably the best example of
Yeah.
it in Lake County.
Yeah.
We all have mutual aid agreements in place. I mentioned we have 37 jurisdictions in Lake County. When you think about fire trucks, and there's always talk about aerial ladders, so those are the big fire trucks that have up to 100 feet of ladder to reach big buildings. We don't need 37 of those in our county. They're about $3 million a piece, and we need a few of them. So we have mutual aid agreements, so we know we have a system in place where certain calls automatically ring out different departments throughout the county. You see consolidation of other specialty units. We have one hazmat unit that various actors from each jurisdiction participate in. You have a bomb squad, you have a narcotics units. All of these are made up of individual policemen and firemen, specialized personnel from different jurisdictions throughout the county. Again, recognizing that these are things that we don't need every single day, and so we train together, we work together. We have common training standards throughout the county for our firefighters, for example, and our EMT providers. We have single oversight countywide for our paramedic providers. So there's a lot of consolidation. There's a group in our county called the Lake County Mayors and Managers Association, and it's made up of essentially the chief chief administrative officers or mayors, chief executives around the county. And it is such a cooperative group.
It is.
There's never been a greater, I've been working for the city of Mentor for over 16 years now, and I've never seen a greater cooperation among jurisdictions in this county. And it saves money. It provides the help that we need when we need it, whether that's with, emergency scenarios, anticipated emergencies, or large gatherings. We're there to help each other, and that makes a big difference to the pocketbook.
It does. And we looked at a ladder truck. We've got the tall 4-story hospital. We've got another factory that's coming in. That's 150,000 square feet. That's going to be a tall building. We looked at a ladder truck, and it was $3.3 million. And then we looked at and said, Painesville's got one to our immediate north, Mentor's got one to our immediate west, and Chardon's got one to our immediate south. Mutual aid agreements are in place. I'm not buying a ladder truck. They're too expensive. I mean, they're necessary, but they're already there, and we have mutual aid agreements for that, so it's worth it. But the other thing I want to touch on, because I know we're getting short on time and Cheryl wants a hard stop at 8, God forbid property taxes go away, it will not be a dollar for dollar replacement of the revenue. Whatever that revenue ends up being, whether it's sales tax distribution or increase in the local government fund from the state, or an increase in income tax where they allow townships to income tax, there's got to be some, there's going to be some inconvenience and there's going to be some pain. I don't see a dollar for dollar replacement, but that's going to mean a loss of services to the residents. One way or another, there's going to be some reductions in services that everybody's going to have to take a bite of that sandwich on. So that's my nickel.
Anyone else? We have like 3 minutes, 2 minutes.
Sorry.
That's okay. Oh,
Yeah.
wasn't going to ask you. What advantage do the people pushing this tax elimination believe in their own minds that this is going to be good for the county and the city? What is their reason? Who's gaining on this? Corporations gaining? Is that the bottom line?
No.
all right, let me repeat that question for the
go ahead.
recording. So the question is, for the initiative to abolish property taxes, what is the advantage? What is their reasoning for it? And then that'll be our last question, because we'll be a little, well, if we have time, we'll do one more, I see.
I will tell, fortunately or unfortunately, Concord Township is the epicenter of this movement. It comes down to freedom and liberty. That's what they will tell you. You're basically renting your house from the government. Even when you pay it off, you're paying rent to the government to maintain your house. And if I don't pay that rent, which is property tax, then the government will come in and throw me out of my home. That's what it comes down to. It's a constitutional freedom and liberty issue. Now keep in mind that property taxes were put into the state constitution in 1825. 1825. It became an issue it became a major issue in 1976 because of why? Crazy inflation and rising housing prices. Fast forward 50 years, it's become an issue again in 2025, 2026 because rising housing prices and inflation. I think it's a little bit cyclical, but they've made it a constitutional issue. It's about freedom and liberty, and quite frankly, they've to their credit, they did go down to Columbus and they tried to talk to state reps and state senators, and they got blown off. Looking for tax reform, looking for help. And they wrote letters and they went down and asked for meetings, and they couldn't get them, so they basically said, screw you, we're going to do this on our own, and here we are. That's the bottom line.
I didn't hear that people was going to advantage to the government. Is that basically?
I think in their minds the advantage is to the individual homeowner that now has freedom and liberty and doesn't have to worry about losing their house to the ever increasing rent property taxes that are imposed. And I think it also is a driver to try to force governments to shrink. That's what I think. That's my opinion.
I want to make one more comment on it, and I won't, to answer your question, sir, I don't know what motivates in individuals in this, but clearly it started with this hyper, we just went through one of the worst inflationary periods in a very long time in our history, coming post-COVID, and that got exaggerated in the housing market, and so this significant increase in the price of homes, motivated by the fact that there's a lack of available housing, and so anytime you have a shortened supply, you're going to see price spikes. So that motivated the discussion on who that hurts and who needs to be helped with that, and those are valid discussions to have, but again, keep in mind, you can go too far too. When we're looking to help seniors and help those who are on fixed incomes, who are in homes that are paid off, that doesn't mean you just rip, you're not taking out the baby with the bathwater.
Right.
Moderation, I think, is necessary. I do want to mention one other thing, though, and I meant to mention this earlier. When you talk about something like the elimination of property taxes, keep in mind that is the most stable tax base that we have, not just in Ohio, but throughout the country. So when you think about large projects, whether it's fire departments or anything that your government builds or large road projects, you're generally doing that with government-backed bonds, or what we call general obligation bonds, and those are backed by property tax. Yep. And the reason for that is property doesn't go away. So investors are going to give you very, very favorable rates because they know that worst case scenario, if the government is unable to pay the bill, it can be assessed against the property of that community. It almost never happens, but that backing gives us much, much lower rates than what you would see if I was a private investor trying to build a building for the same rate. Our city of Mentor, and we were fortunate because we did most of our borrowing during a very low rate period, 10 or so years ago. Most of our debt is around 2% or less. And you would never see, it's what is it, Andy, 4 or 5%
Yeah, it's
now?
bonds with a good credit rating are running in the 4s. Concord Township's bond for Fire Station 1's at 1.88, 1.89%.
So those are in the best of times.
It's incredible.
It's about double that now. But if you take away property taxes, you're going to see that skyrocket because sales taxes, income taxes are very volatile. Investors don't like those because if your economy is just in a downturn, your income is going to be in a downturn as well. So that just raises the cost of doing the things that we do right now to maintain the same level of service or asset provision.
That's interesting because I know the bond market attorney, the bond houses, bond councils, they've written letters to the State House saying, look, if you get rid of inside millage or you get rid of property taxes, everybody that holds a bond is going to get sued because you're automatically in default.
You have billions and
you have broken
billions
the contract.
of dollars in Ohio that are paid for and backed by the security of property in this state.
It'll crush the bond market.
It will. You're talking about economic unrest generated by that.
Sure.
I don't think we can really know the impact, but it won't be good.
Is there anything you want to add? And then
I think to the question.
we'll do your question, then we're done, because then it'll be
Is,
8:15. And we'll have a hard stop at 8:15 now.
I think if you look in Lake County, and you look what Michael Zern set up, for example, collecting property taxes. You get a bill for $2,000, but if you work with the treasurer on property taxes, you can pay on a monthly basis. And most of the argument I've seen about abolishing property taxes has been those homeowners that have paid off their house, all of a sudden they're on a fixed income, and they get that $2,000 bill. Well, here in Lake County, you can pay that on a monthly basis. There are programs set up to do that. To the points here, we have very little debt in Mentor on the Lake, but before we passed certain levies, we had to borrow money for police radios and equipment and things like that. And we don't have to, knock on wood, we don't have to do that today, but there was a time when, before we had the levies, that we had to do that.
All right, what is your question? And then I'll repeat it and we'll finish. No, nope, gentlemen, back, yeah.
It's rather simple. I think this whole thing was triggered by these damn spikes. We went up 37% in ours, we live in Mentor. And it was you're forced by the state to reassess every 6 years or 3 years? Because of this spike, I think that's what triggered this whole thing. Is anything being done to either control that some way?
So the question is about HOMA reassessments and the timing of doing them. And is there anything being done to kind of help in that respect? Control it.
Yeah, the state legislature passed a bill. I don't have the number of the bill, but the state legislature passed a bill. They can't, you'll never see a 37% increase again because it's capped at the rate of inflation. So if inflation for the next time we go through a reevaluation, should property taxes still be around, hopefully they are, and your house is reevaluated, regardless of the sales price, your house can only go up by the rate of inflation. So if inflation's 2.5% that year, you're only going to see a 2.5% increase in your property value. They've put that stopgap in. That's already been passed and signed by the governor. That's already done.
Yeah, there was a House Bill 124 as well that did a couple of things. It will, over the years, beginning in 2026, increase the owner occupancy credit at the state level from that 2.5%, and it'll go all the way up to over 15% by 2029. But one of the other components of that bill was that the county auditor can now has some discretion on using comparable properties. So, you see that classic example where a neighborhood has had stable values, maybe $300,000 or $250,000 homes, and all of a sudden one sells for $600,000, and everybody's spikes as a result of that. Nothing much has changed in your neighborhood, so the county auditor now will have some discretion to be able to exclude some of those outliers, and I think that'll be a positive. Again, as well, most of what has happened at the state level, and we spoke about that earlier, are aimed at trying to assist predominantly that owner-occupied homeowner, and I think those are great approaches. I mentioned this earlier. Those are measures that try to mitigate those increases. I think that the state ought to consider looking at some sort of mechanism that allows them to adjust that a little bit easier from year to year. But these changes were a good start. They'll impact some communities in a disadvantageous way, but I think most communities will see these changes as positive. The best thing that could happen in the long run is that the market just shifts, as it tends to do cyclically, to see some relief in the price of homes. I've got 2 children in their 20s, and we're worried that it'll be a very, very long time before they're able to afford. There's no such thing as a starter home anymore, and that's lamentable. I think we need to all work on that. I know that our jurisdiction, and I think just about everybody's working on doing their part to find ways to increase that supply and bring down the cost of housing so that it doesn't become an overwhelming component of your overall expenses. We're fighting things at the grocery store, and it's tough everywhere right now.
And to your suggestion about the property value going way up, again, the county has what they call the Board of Revision. If you feel like, to Ken's point,
I did that once.
Okay.
It worked.
Well, there you go. And I,
Yeah, they listen.
well, and I think when you go there, if you're in a neighborhood of, ranch homes or something like that, you take the comparables in with you, and they will look at everything that you're presenting, and then I'm not sure if they were able to adjust your value down then? Yeah, I think that's a great tool to have in Lake County. They'll sit and listen and then, make adjustments as appropriate.
And I wanted to add, I believe I read that we got an extra year before the next assessment because the
Yes.
state wanted to balance the 88 counties in their 3-year cycles. It was heavy on 1 year. And so we actually are going to go 4 years. So I don't know what year that is that will be the next assessment, but you do get an extra year. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you to our panel.
Thank
I'm very
you.
appreciative of all the
Thank you.
information. Thank you all for here and your great questions. They were very valuable. And I wish you all a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.